As we enter the 1980s, we would begin to see a new era of contemporary horror and ghost films that would go on to define a generation even till this day. One only needs to look to Hollywood's constant need to remake films from this era to notice its influence and importance to captivate. Enter 1980's The Changeling, a Canadian psychological horror film directed by Peter Maddock and starring the legendary George C. Scott and Trish Van Devere, Scott's real-life wife. The story is based upon events that writer Russell Hunter said he experienced while he was living in the Henry Treat Rogers mansion of Denver, Colorado. John Russell, a composer living in New York, moves cross-country to Washington State following the death of his wife and daughter in a traffic accident while on a winter vacation in upstate New York. In suburban Seattle, John rents a large, old and eerie Victorian-era mansion and begins piecing his life back together. However, John soon discovers that he has unexpected and unwelcomed company in his new home, the unhappy ghost of a murdered young boy. The ghost makes his presence felt by various phenomena, such as shattering windows, abruptly opening and shutting doors, and manifesting itself dramatically during a seance. John investigates the identity of the dead child and finds that the mystery is linked to a powerful local family, the heir of which is a wealthy United States Senator, Joseph Carmichael. The same year would give us the legendary take on Stephen King's infamous classic The Shining, a 1980 British-American psychological horror film produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick, co-written with novelist Diane Johnson and starring Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Danny Lloyd, and Scatman Crothers. The film is based upon Stephen King's 1977 novel The Shining, although the film and the novel differ in significant ways. In the film, Jack Torrance, a writer and recovering alcoholic, takes a job as an off-season caretaker at the isolated Overlook Hotel. His young son possesses psychic abilities, and he is able to see things from the past and future, such as the ghosts who inhabit the hotel. Sometime after settling in, the family is trapped in the hotel by a snowstorm, and Jack gradually becomes influenced by a supernatural presence, descends into madness, and ultimately attempts to murder his wife and son. The year would leave off with a trifecta, with the introduction of The Fog, a 1980 American horror film directed by the legendary John Carpenter, who also co-wrote the screenplay and created the music for his films, as he tends to do for his other works. It stars Adrienne Barbeau, Jamie Lee Curtis, Tom Atkins, Janet Leigh, and Hal Holbrook. It tells the story of a strange glowing fog that sweeps in over a small coastal town in California, bringing with it the vengeful ghosts of mariners who were killed in a shipwreck there exactly 100 years prior. The Fog was Carpenter's first theatrical film after the success of his 1978 horror film Halloween, which also starred Jamie Lee Curtis. Although given mixed reviews, the film was commercially a success. A remake of the film was made in 2005. And finally, we end things off with 1981's Ghost Story, a small B-movie style horror film that was adapted by the novel of the same name, but with greatly toned down efforts and was simplified from its original source. Four successful elderly gentlemen members of the Chowder Society share a gruesome 50-year-old secret. When one of the Edward Wanderley twins' sons dies in a bizarre accident, the group begins to see patterns of frightening events developing. Join us next time as we continue our travels down the road of horror.